Call the meeting of the Eugene Planning Commission to order. And as with each of our public meetings, we open it with a public comment period for anyone who would like to speak. And we have a request to speak this morning from Sue Walling.
Right here. Hi, I'm Sue Walling. I'm on the Sustainability Commission, and I just wanted to speak very briefly with you today about CLUTAC, which is the Coordinated Land Use Transportation something or other. At any rate, this was a joint committee of the Planning Commission and the Sustainability Commission that was attempting to provide some kind of analysis of West Eugene MX, I believe. Now, I don't know if I wasn't even involved in it, so I don't know if they tried to address other issues as well. But at any rate, they met over a year or a year and a half or something like that, and put together kind of a draft document about West Eugene MX, and then everything kind of went dormant for a while. So the Sustainability Commission was just thinking, well, with the environmental assessment of MX now out, and the City Council probably going to make a decision on it this fall sometime, shouldn't we at least try to salvage the work that was already done and try to come up with some sort of input from the CLUTAC committee? And so I'm basically just kind of asking whether you all have any energy to just try to finish the work that was already done and put it together into something that we could submit on behalf of both commissions concerning West Eugene MX. If so, you can certainly probably contact Babe O'Sullivan would be the most direct way, or you can just contact me. I'm hoping there's not a whole lot of work left to be done, just to try to finish what was done before and kind of put the thoughts together into a coherent document that we could submit to council. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I'll respond first, and I see John would like to provide some information. CLUTAC did have two different generations. There was the original group, joint committee, of which myself and Heidi Byerly, Commissioner Byerly, were participating on. And then in the last year, we had two new members take over. And so that this group has continued to work with and support CLUTAC. John?
Well, and I was a member of that second generation. So as I recall, Bill Randall and myself were the Planning Commission representatives in that iteration. And we focused on doing a triple bottom line analysis of West Eugene MX. And as you said, I think we came pretty close to getting it mostly done. But it just sort of languished for some reason or another. And a lot of the energy that was there was Josh Goes, and of course he's moved on from the Sustainability Commission. But I think there's something we could pick up there and provide some advice to the council from.
Okay.
Assuming it passes muster with both the Sustainability Commission and the Planning Commission.
Yeah, that's kind of what we were thinking, is that if it's got to go through both commission, it'll take a while. So it'd be good to try to get going on quickly.
Good. I certainly can support that, and I assume Bill would as well. Are we going to have two members from each commission, or three?
I don't know.
At one point I thought it was 2-2. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as far as next steps, there may be a call to Babe O'Sullivan is the next step. And we can take that on and try to get something going.
Good. Yeah, it will take some time to finalize it, get it through the commission, and get it before the council, before their decision then.
Next agenda item is chair and vice chair elections. And I guess just for the record, we've got a couple of folks missing today. Rick Duncan is not here, and I guess Bill Randall not going to be here today?
Late. He said late. He had a meeting at 11.
That's right. I remember seeing that now. So with that, I'll open it up for discussions or questions or nominations. John.
I nominate Randy Luddick to be our next chair.
Second.
Nomination and seconded. Do we need any discussion on this, or should we just vote?
Well, I would call to see if there's any other nominations.
Any other nominations? Thank you. Okay, well, Mr. Leddick?
What?
Looks like
I don't
you're
have
the
not
guy.
prepared to give a speech.
Well, let's put it to a vote then. Those in favor of Andy Leddick for chair.
Okay, all right.
So it passes unanimously. Mr. Leddick?
Your condolences are accepted. Thank you for your service, Jeff.
Indeed.
You had to substitute for Heidi quite a few times, too, so.
Yeah, I got a little bit of pre-on-the-job training, but
Yeah.
Heidi had several commitments, both planned and unplanned, unfortunately for her.
And all that training and experience culminated in the longest public hearing with no public testimony ever.
Yeah, I guess that's going to be on my record. I'll be sure to keep me off any future chair appearances.
Okay, nominations for vice chair.
I'll nominate Bill Randall.
And I'll second.
Second, any other nominations? All
Actually,
those-
seconds aren't required for nominations.
All those in favor of John?
Oh, I was going for the all in favor.
All those in
I'll
favor
start.
of railroading Bill in as vice chair, raise your hand. Okay, Bill's the vice chair.
All right.
All right. Now you can relax, Jeff. Okay, so work item number 3, Carolyn, Envision Eugene has consumed planning staff, planning commission for the past couple years. Is that going to change, and where do we fit in?
Well, yeah, thank you. We're being joined at the table by all of our senior planners who are going to help in our discussion of the work plan. I'll just kick it off by saying that there are a number of changes afoot in the, it's funny, I kind of am looking to Robin. There are a number of changes in the planning division. You all got an email that Lisa Gardner has accepted a temporary assignment in the city manager's office working with intergovernmental relations. And that's probably a 6-month to a year-long appointment. And there will be some kind of formal process to identify who will be her her interim, who will fill in for her on an interim basis while she's on that assignment. In the meantime, it's myself, and I was designated because she was taking some time off with getting married and everything like that. So that has been extended a little bit to kind of fill in here, and we'll just see where we go from here. And in addition, I didn't know if you guys knew that Kara Axe is leaving us. She, what's the name of the school she's going to?
I forget.
She's going to, she has a full ride to a design school in New York City, and she is leaving us August 9th, I believe is her last day. And so we will be in Rhonda Crocker's capable hands when she leaves, and they've kind of coordinated things. So Rhonda will probably be your main contact person kind of for here on out. So we have those changes. We also are in a hiring process where we have 2 vacant associate planner positions, and if you'll recall, these are Lydia McKinney's position that's been open for a couple years now, and Jason Dedrick. And so we're hiring 2 planners, and at least one of those is posted currently, and the other one will be posted shortly.
They're actually both posted.
They're both posted, okay. And we hope to have those people on board in kind of early fall, so September, October-ish. And,
Jason no longer here?
oh, you didn't know that?
No.
Okay, so Jason accepted a position in the city manager's office. So, sorry if we hadn't informed you on that, but that occurred probably about 3 or 4 months ago. We still do have him for 8 hours a week, and so we're keeping him busy on some of the industrial lands and monitoring work items. But that will probably transition into him being full-time over there, especially once we get our new planners on board. So, yeah, a lot of movement.
So who is this new Carolyn Burke person?
Oh, and that. There's this new person, yeah. So that's the other thing to be clear on. Carolyn Weiss is now Carolyn Burke. And
Congratulations.
So, thank you. It's difficult to change your name at this point in your life and your career. Everyone's like, who is that? But, yeah, that's that. So I still introduce myself from time to time as Carolyn Weiss, so I'm not offended if you call me Carolyn Weiss from time to time either. So, kind of then moving into, with all those changes, we're here to talk about what our work plan is over the next year. And really wanted to kick off that discussion, although we do have some new hires coming on. Wanted to remind you, it was 2 budget cycles ago that we laid off 4 planners and reduced the size of the planning division by over 20%, and we are the smallest planning division that we have been in decades. At the same time, we have been doing some of the most complicated work that we've ever done with the Envision Eugene process. And I have to say, as a result of those 2 things coming together, we have honed our skills and become highly efficient.
Quality, not quantity.
I think so, and so I think that we are really actually being very efficient and producing really good work right now. We've kind of, as I said, honed our skills. We're excited about our work plan that's coming up because, as you well know, the Envision Eugene process has been a little bit amorphous and we haven't quite been sure the direction we're going in. But with council kind of approving at least the Envision Eugene proposal and moving us into the adoption phase, we have a pretty discrete list of tasks that we're doing now. And I think we're kind of excited about that because it gives us a little more clarity. And also it gives us an opportunity to work more closely with the Planning Commission on some of these discrete tasks and to be kind of clear about what your role is in these work items is. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. There is not, I guess I'll just say this off the bat, we don't see there's a lot of discretionary items in this work plan. Some things are mandated by state law, and we do those day in and day out. And other things we have been directed by the City Council with the Envision Eugene implementation to do a set of discrete tasks. So if we kind of flip to the work plan item page of the agenda, I will let our senior planners describe the items, but if you're wondering, for example, what are the dotted lines in this plan, that is in recognition that not everything happens full speed ahead at the same time. And so there are some items that are not in the high priority of either being mandated or being Envision Eugene adoption package that are still really important to the community. And while we don't have the resources to go full speed ahead on them, we do want to look for opportunities for what we're calling a soft start. And so where you see kind of that dotted line, that is, and it kind of varies from project to project, but that means that we know it's a priority. We want to try to move it forward as resources allow. And in some instances, the dotted line comes after a solid line, and that kind of is in recognition that some work items will take a big push, and then maybe they'll, as we do coordination with other partners, that it becomes less of a resource issue for us. And so there's some kind of fuzziness in our work plan, and that is intentional because we are not exactly sure how long each one of these items is going to take, but you kind of get the general sense of where we are. So I think with those...
And the difference between those that have arrowheads and those that don't?
I think I will let, I believe that if they don't have an arrowhead at the end, then that's substantial completion, but I'll let the seniors correct me if I'm wrong on that. I think that's all I had to say. So I will turn it over. Who's going first? Gabe? Okay.
So you will see the mission critical taking care of business section at the top. Really, this is a reflection of the ongoing day-to-day work in the division, primarily around land use applications. It also reflects our work at the Permit and Information Center and with project consultation meetings with applicants and their design teams early on. And you know, in terms of the Planning Commission's role, you're probably familiar with a variety of plan and code amendments that come through this body, and your role there would be as a recommending body to the City Council. In other situations, you serve as an appeals body, making a final local decision on land use applications. I think some recent examples would include the Rexius plan amendments, zone change appeal for the OBO Enterprises project, Orchard Row houses. Some additional projects you may see in the coming year would include probably additional code amendments, the eWeb Riverfront Master Plan project, and you know, as we've discussed, there are several Land Use Board of Appeals remands that may come back to the Planning Commission. Let's see what's all on the list here. I guess I would just highlight that our staff also supports the Historic Preservation Program, and in coordination with the State Historic Preservation Office, we're administering a grant as a certified local government. We handle a variety of applications for alterations of historic properties or new nominations. And really the Planning Commission's role there is well, the Historic Review Board is a subcommittee of the Planning Commission, and currently Jeff Mills sits on the board as the Planning Commission representative. The list also reflects a number of what I would call special projects or other sort of ongoing staffing efforts, regional planning, development of other code amendments like stormwater development standards and things like that. Yeah. I'll turn it over to Alyssa for, unless there are questions.
Just to clarify, you mentioned the eWeb concept plan development, but that's really under the area planning effort rather than mission critical? Is that, or is it switched? Is it misplaced?
It's actually both. And to clarify, I think over the coming year, the Planning Commission is probably going to see integration of a number of staffing efforts, both that might be seen as Envision Eugene implementation, but also kind of reflecting private applications, or at least in this case, eWeb as an applicant. Moving forward with a package of plan amendments and developing a new special area zone for the property. So, again, the Commission's role would be as a recommending body to the Council for that.
And in my introduction, I neglected to say that we're not going to hit every single work item in our initial introduction. We'll kind of each talk about them as a category, and then we can kind of have a dialogue about and answer individual questions about work items. Oh, and Alyssa pointed out that I should also mention the staff, that final item. We do have kind of a staff person that is the lead on each one of these projects, and we included that in there so you would kind of know who to call if you had a question. But there's a little key. You see, sometimes the person has an asterisk next to their name, and that means that they're also doing a majority of the heavy lifting on the project, a lot of the actual kind of day in and day out work. And in some other instances, they are more supervising the work, and so an associate planner may be doing most of the work on that. So that was just in kind of understanding our resource allocations. That was something we were looking at.
And really, really short, like, there's only probably two other names that aren't on this list, so keep that in mind.
Not a lot of other...
Right, there's not a lot of... We're not missing too much planning division staff at this meeting. So I'm going to kind of cover the second category, which is finishing what we started, the new Eugene plan. As it states in the AIS, this is the body of work that we need to do to actually adopt a Eugene-specific urban growth boundary. So not just a boundary expansion, but to prove that we have 20 years of land for all of our needs inside the urban growth boundary. And this ranges from, our new local plan that Robin's going to be giving you an overview of after this item, finishing the UGB expansion, figuring out where exactly and how much we're expanding by, code amendments and incentives that are necessary for adoption, things that we have to do, that we've committed to doing, such as creating alley access lots. We said we would do that because we know it creates a certain number of capacity for housing units. And then also as part of that is the adoption package itself. I think I've mentioned this before, but there's about 80 pages of criteria that we'll have to have findings, and then we'll have all of these items will be attached. And so this adoption package is going to be, fairly large. And so that pulling that together is quite a process in and of itself. And a lot of this, so most of what happens here, it's technical and legal work. There's also going to be, there will be more public participation in a number of these items as well, and we can get into that during the question part. Terry, did you have any more on that one?
Yeah, just to highlight some things on employment and residential. So the biggest parts of our need are for jobs and housing. And so those two line items have to do with tying up the technical studies for proving our need and how we're going to accomplish it. And then one extra thing about residential. For redesignation, you'll recall that we're planning to study the area out at Crow Road and West 11th. And figure out where the best places are to redesignate to low-density residential. And that work is underway. It's a pretty exciting project, doing some high-level master planning with the Parks Division and Transportation Planning staff, and Commissioner Randall is also helping us provide some design input and feedback, which is really great. I think that's it for now.
In his role as commissioner?
Yep.
Okay.
And then the third category is a running start. It's the early Envision Eugene implementation. These are items that are not required for the UGB adopted, but things that we've committed to in the Envision Eugene recommendation. So they're, basically they're just good planning. There's a number of code amendments that we want to complete. Those are actually in a separate attachment here. All the code amendments are listed. On the last attachment. There's also more incentives, financial, facilitative, other types of incentives that we'd want to get going on. And then finally, the monitoring. We will be required to have a monitoring program for certain elements. The state requires that. It's not required to be in place at the time of adoption necessarily, but we're actually already starting that work to figure out what data we need to collect, what resources we have now to collect it, what do we need to change to get to collect that information better. So we actually are starting that particular work item now, but like I said, it's not actually required to be in place or required to be part of that adoption package.
Okay.
Good. I'll introduce the last section there, which is about, good. I think it's for Carolyn's copy. Thank you. About area planning, taking the vision to the next level. So this is, of course, in the draft recommendation, there's a lot of talk about vision in here, and there's, I think, a lot of emphasis being placed on doing some really detailed studies of how our community is going to look and function in the future. And area planning is one of the ways that we are talking about doing that. So there are many parts of the community that are interested in that. There are several that are actually noted, I think, in the recommendations, and those are part of the work plan here. There are also some bigger picture area planning concepts, such as transit corridor planning, that are included in that. So the ability to get around to doing this is really, of course, contingent on how far we get with these other critical components, the finishing what we started, and of course, the mission critical work as well. So there are a lot of dotted lines in this part of the work plan here, and that's just a reflection of that uncertainty. However, having them on here just shows everyone, hey, we're serious about this. We really want to get to it. I also want to mention that it's important that we get a couple of new folks on board to help us push some of these things through and be able to carry that work forward. And fortunately, we're well down the road in that process, so hopefully early in the fall we'll have a couple other staff people that can help us out. And that'll, I think, make it more likely that we'll be able to start some of these projects down here sooner rather than later.
Can I add something?
Sure.
About River Road, Santa Clara? I just wanted to call the Commission's attention to this report, which John will be really familiar with. Have you all seen this already?
No.
This is the Squirrel Final Report and Recommendations, the Santa Clara River Road Outreach and Learning Group sent this on to the City Council, and it will be kind of the basis for the neighborhood planning effort that we do under the Planning Division's work program. So I can send you a link to that report if you'd like that. Sure.
I would just add, we'll hopefully be another step down that path through script, so there may be yet a more refined set of information to work from.
Excellent. Got to have a new group with a new acronym.
The script stamp.
Santa Clara River Road Implementation Team. Implementation and
Project, I think.
project team.
Yeah.
Jerry takes the word and fits it to the meeting.
Scroll and script.
I like it.
Yeah.
Script.
That's what needs to be planned.
It's so literary.
So, with that, do you have any questions about specific items, or?
Who'd like to begin? John?
We may or may not see the Deerbrook plan. If it does come forward, by understanding it's heavily focused on needed housing. It might be wise for us to have a primer on what needed housing is about before we start that process.
Yep, we've been thinking of that very thing. So if it does come your way, we will try to make sure we schedule that in advance.
Thank you.
Steve?
I had a general comment, and then I'll hold off on individual comments. But just as a suggestion, I work at a very big company that does a lot of cycles of things. And one technique that we use, and I don't know if it might benefit you, but we also use the concept of milestones. So like M1, 2, and 3, or whatever you want to call them. Where we work, they have code names sometimes. But some of these things are like precursors to others, and it gives you a way to sort of relate that information together. So, and sometimes you have to move a milestone. In other words, the City Council is giving you a date when they presume they're going to decide on an issue, and then they postpone it. But just a suggestion, it might be a way for you to also organize these in a way that helps you to link them a little better and explains that to other people. That's just a general suggestion.
I think that's a good suggestion, and I believe that each one of these work items has its own kind of task list and schedule, and that's probably a good place to identify those milestones, and then maybe it makes sense to then kind of put them back on the large, so you get those relationships that you're talking about.
Because actually looking at it, it looks like you have several milestones there where the
Yes.
things end and stuff.
Yes,
So you've
that's
already
true.
done that.
You're right.
Just it makes it a little more explicit.
Is that it, Steve?
But that's my general, actually specific ones, but
Bill, you're here. You were
My apologies for being late.
You were unanimously elected vice chair.
That's what I get for missing a meeting.
Congratulations. I'll be gone for the next 3 months.
Gee, thanks.
Jeff, you're next.
Yeah, I just would want a little bit of clarification. First, I get a sense from reading the document, from what you say today, that there's more work than there are resources, at least at the moment. Is that correct? And then I guess I want to understand, given that it'll be very important to make sure we prioritize milestoning is a very good idea. And am I correct in saying that top to bottom, higher priorities are at the top, we work our way down, relatively speaking?
Yes.
That, just make sure I understand what's on the document here. Okay.
Yeah.
I've got myself in the queue a number of questions too, so I'll just ask a couple. On the special work projects, can you just quickly tell us what the Lane Livability Consortium grant is about?
Wow. That could be a work session in itself. The Lane Livability Consortium is a grant that we, as a region, we received from, was it the EPA and HUD?
Primarily.
Primarily HUD. So a federal grant of how much?
$3 million.
Yeah, several million.
Yes, several $1 million grant, and it is to promote regional planning, kind of in a nutshell. So including not just the jurisdictions of Springfield, Eugene, and Lane County, but also some of the other service providers, like for low-income housing, for instance.
Public health.
Public health.
LTD, web, sub.
So it's kind of, it's come at a good time, I think, when, the Metro Plan is going through a lot of changes because of HB 3337, and probably giving us an opportunity to redefine how the different jurisdictions work together and can draw on the resources of these other kind of non-governmental organizations to help move forward with specific goals around economic development,
Affordable housing,
transportation, and sustainability.
Public health. And public health.
So a lot of the efforts are really looking at trying to look at the interests and the efforts of different organizations in the region. Some of those are governmental agencies, others are nonprofits, and other community services that overlap in the types of missions they have. And so part of what this effort does is look at what available resources, plans, policies, and so forth already exist in the region, and trying to look at where those gaps may be. And this is one component of it. It's not the entire project, but to really try to better understand all the resources that may be available in the region and how to pool those resources more strategically. So in the areas that we just mentioned, affordable housing, transportation, and so forth.
Is there a timeline established with this?
Yes.
And I don't have all the dates and times, but I want to say it's about another year and a half worth of effort, something like that. So it's a major undertaking with a lot of different players in the region as part of this. Stephanie Jennings in the City of Eugene is actually heading it up as the project manager, but she's really serving in a regional capacity, not.
Do we have some kind of role in this eventually?
You may, and it's a couple different ways. One may be with some particular efforts that are underway with that grant, but the other piece that I'll just throw in here, because you may have questions on that too, is that we're also trying to coordinate that work with the scenario planning effort, which you also may not be very familiar with, but something that we're mandated to do through a state statute, which is looking at more technically around greenhouse gas reduction scenarios that we are required to develop as a region. We're trying to partner these two efforts to some degree to try to, there's definitely some areas of overlap in the efforts to try to kind of make the most of those two grants, or well, one's a grant and the other is being offset by ODOT funding, to try to partner those as best as possible. There's definitely going to be some elements of that scenario planning that will likely come back through you, either formally or perhaps even informally as committee representatives, something to that extent. That process has about a 2+ year timeline to it as well. In essence, at the end of the day, we as a region or as an MPO are required to have a common scenario that we all can agree upon that will be presented to the state. So your role in that will probably be at places along the way, not necessarily as a formal review body necessarily at the end of it, but more probably participating as we go.
Okay. And the other question I have is the next thing, updates to city's electronic land use review and tracking systems. Is that part of the monitoring program or something?
It's actually separate, but it's a great opportunity for us to get some improvements done in order to do the monitoring. It's kind of a two-phase. I'll give you probably more information than you need, but we're looking at, actually we're in the process of acquiring an electronic plan review function so that both building permit staff, Public Works Engineering, and planning staff can review plans and make comments on them electronically. And then kind of the second, you'll be able to submit them electronically, we'll be able to review them, send you back comments electronically. So we're working right now to get that established. And I think we're hoping to have start implementing it by the end of the year. Probably phase 2 of that would be looking at our actual databases. We have a building permit 1 and a land use application, and how can we improve upon those to make them better functionally, and then also to get some of the monitoring data that we need that we're not able to capture right now.
Steve, back to you.
Okay. I have a bunch of things that I marked up, just, so I guess I'll start. Under land for commercial jobs, number 2, that would be on page 6.
And you're looking at the technical components?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm just going chronologically. I'm just going to do a couple and then I'll come back and someone else will. So I'll do those 2 pages and back to each. Under 3, it talks about a process to address compatibility with the existing neighborhoods for direct staff to pursue area planning efforts.
What
And
page?
It's page 6 of the AIS. It's the technical components document. You gave your page away.
I don't
right?
see a number 3, though.
It's one. It's C3.
Okay. Got it.
Under C. What I'm trying to do is,
Gotcha.
in general, what I've tried to do initially is go through and look at the city manager's recommendations and make sure that that's requested in the plan.
Okay.
So, so for example, 2 does a very good job of identifying potential incentives. It talks about it in specific. But 3, it talks about area planning, and it talks about area planning as a process to address compatibility. And I didn't see that mentioned in the next steps in the recommendation. Maybe just a minor oversight, but because you're using area planning as a general term. But I just wanted to make it, just mention it, that if we're talking always about area planning and it's in the context of also addressing compatibility, then we should note that up front about area planning. And then if we skip down under the next page on land for existing jobs, under 3, under C, it directs staff to include consideration of the compatibility issues, and then there's nothing identified in the work plan here to deal with that. So again, I was trying to, there's several places where I've done this. I've looked where there was not something mentioned, and I just wanted to make sure that was
Yeah.
under the individual
In other words,
UGB
I'll give you one
expansion
other
or
place where
program.
that occurs. It occurs on page 9, under land for parks, where it talks about the pros and cons of adding the airport, and there's nothing there. I just wanted to note that, you might want to stick something there to show that you're responding to all of the city managers. Again, I don't know if this has already been presented to the city manager.
Well, the way that we're addressing those is in the actual work plan itself. For instance, where we address the compatibility issues with industrial lands, that would be, can you flip to the work plan?
It's probably not specifically.
It's not identified specifically, but it would be under the finishing what we started UGB expansion. So the items on the work plan that we've given you are, those items are pretty broad, and they encompass a lot of tasks. And so the items that are inside the technical document that went to council is just at a more refined level. But if you're kind of just suggesting for transparency and clarity that, we should be clear about that, we can also do that in the descriptions of the items, which start on page 10 of the AIS. And I don't know that it's explicit in there, but if not, we should make it explicit in there.
Yeah, it's not explicit.
For example, I have a good case where that is, because it specifically instructs you to look at transit corridor planning. I mean, the city manager says, look at transit corridor planning and look at it in terms of compatibility, and that's not mentioned at all in the work item on page 14. That's a key component.
Yes. Yeah.
So again, I was just trying to make sure that you filled in the right sides there to show what was going on.
And I think with regards to the transit planning one, there are a number of kind of benefits and outcomes from the corridor planning and the area planning in general. Compatibility is one of them. We were just kind of using it as a big catchphrase and not saying specifically what the kind of outcomes or desired benefits are. Because there's other things such as identifying where more density is appropriate, identifying what the needed capital improvements might be along that corridor, and looking at the transitions between the corridor and the neighborhood. So there's a lot of outcomes, I think, from those planning efforts.
It just seems that that's, in terms of transit corridor planning, that's going to be
It's a big
key
one.
issue, and it's a challenge. I'll say one more thing, and then I'll come back and let other people talk. On page 8, Janet, plan, follow the next steps. Under B, there's a word there that I felt uncomfortable with under B2, so it would be the right column under land for single family. Analysis and eventual recommendation. I would say analysis and recommendation, because just there's an implication when you say eventual that it's already been decided in advance, and I don't really think that's what you meant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we'll circle back around.
Yep.
John Belcher?
First of all, I'm glad to see that there's an item in there that will give us a parcel-specific land use plan. That is very exciting.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Can a parcel have more than one designation? Can it be split?
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, glad to see opportunity siting mentioned at least 3 or 4 times in there. Glad to see that it's not just going to be South Atlanta, but the big concept of opportunity siting is moving forward as well. And then a request sometime before the day is over, if you could bring us give us an update of where the city council sits on getting to what we're going to do with expanding the urban growth boundary and other concepts and Envision Eugene. That would be helpful to hear at some point in time.
So kind of a summary of the council's discussion?
Right.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
John Jaworski?
First of all, I'm impressed. It's a very challenging work plan, I'll say that much. Some of the questions I was going to ask have already been asked. Maybe I'll ask them in a different way. Following up on Commissioner Baker, when I took a look at some of the specifics that you had on the other pages, because it led to other questions, it would be nice, a way that I would have seen it is, how do you relate this work plan to those, even if they had a subtitle, like this says land use amendments, and well, where is that? Is that under finishing or mission critical, and then the subtitle? That would have helped real quick, because then it gets into my next question, like when I read your implementation efforts, I can't go back and relate it to this chart, because my question is what is the timing of the implementation efforts, and can it occur even before the end of, let's say, the year and a half from now? In other words, can implementation efforts, if you've finished something, be occurring? So part of that was being able to link back, implementation efforts identified here over to here to see where it fits in what quarter.
That's a good comment, and I think in particular you're talking about some of the code amendments, and can those be adopted prior to the finished Envision Eugene, new UGB kind of, and I think that's the direction we're headed in. We because there's so many to do, kind of, and actually, I would say the first code amendments were those multifamily code amendments. So that's an example of kind of an early implementation. The next code amendments that are underway will have that that same goal. But I understand your comment that it's maybe not explicit in
And also
in the
on
timing.
incentives, because that's something, if you identify quickly, could be done early and be helping, even though code amendments is really a lot more work.
Right.
Because a lot of these are brought up, my other question is someone mentioned, milestones, benchmarks. When I look at this, I assume it began in June, because it says June to August, the first quarter. what would help me in relating this to this is maybe, once every other month or once every 2 months, if we got like a one-pager that said, of these items, this is maybe where we are, or have we completed this, or we haven't started this, of the subs, that the subtitle work elements that are under that. Because when I look at this and I say, okay, land use code, and I see 8 things, well, you're not going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11 things. You're not going to do 11 things simultaneously. So I just wanted to get a better idea of where you are on the subcomponents.
I think that's...
Easily, but just little quick.
That's a good suggestion, and I've heard that before. How can we provide the Planning Commission and other interested parties updates on implementation, kind of ongoing updates, and I think that's a great suggestion.
So, John, I hope that during the course of the year, if we're not getting that, I think, it's time we should be saying something, if you'll bring that up, and we can place it as an agenda item or disseminate it somehow. So,
because we'll be bringing...
I've been appointed the monitor for the Planning Commission.
We'll be bringing individual pieces to you, but I can see how kind of a more holistic overview of where we are would be helpful.
That's it. Thank you.
Jeff?
Yeah, I had a couple of things, just once again, making sure I understand. From the technical components, item 2B1, that's on page 8. It says initiate code amendments to remove barriers to redevelopment activity in those areas. And I guess I just wanted to make sure I understand, is this kind of implies that the barriers are already known and identified?
Correct.
And I guess I just want to confirm, there is a list of barriers that we know about that you all are going to attempt to address?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then the second one is just really nitpicky here, but I'll go ahead and throw it out there. Under item 3, I notice that there are single-family home counts associated with items A, B, and D, but none with C. I guess I would just ask, not that I want you to put a number there, just why was it left the way it was left?
Where are we?
Hey, where are you?
I'm sorry, how to plan for single-family homes, A, we got 650 with A, 160 with B, and 910 with D, but C kind of says we're going to do something, but we don't really have a goal or a result expected.
So we have one for D, we have one for A and B, but not for C.
And I'm not telling you have to have one. It's just
That's
kind of-
because it's not as clear
Yeah.
at this point in time. For example, some of those, so the item we're talking about says, initiate plan amendments to accommodate additional single-family homes by planning for infrastructure extensions to serve vacant and partially vacant areas inside the UGB that are currently not served.
I guess maybe a statement that basically says that we're not sure what the result
Right.
would be there, just to would add a point of clarity.
Sure. Okay.
I did, Jeff. Circled back to myself on this, a couple of questions on page 11 of the AIS, the comprehensive plan development. The bullet item is develop community design guide. What's that going to do, and how is that different from the Envision Eugene pillars, and where are we heading with that?
That's again, it could be a whole work session in and of itself too, but in a nutshell, the community design guide is a more visual and tangible manifestation of the vision. So we've kind of described it in words and kind of more policy statements and goals and that kind of thing. What we're trying to do with the community design guide is translate that into how it might look in terms of what is a good corridor design. What do we talk about when we say neighborhood character? So something that can be, I'd say a seed material or a springboard for area planning, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time we go and talk about design in the community.
Okay.
I think we'll talk a little bit more about that in our next
Okay.
agenda item as well.
Okay. The other question I had is down on residential lands. It talks about updating both the housing needs analysis and the buildable lands inventory. Didn't we just kind of get done with all that?
We have to do the technical part of it, though. Like actually updating the document. Like, I think the numbers have been agreed upon, but there's a document behind all of those.
Well, but the
BLI will be rerun.
The BLI actually will be rerun and
We have to
mapped.
account for the vacant land that's been developed over the last 3 years. And
Yes.
Okay, we're
2008 to 2011.
Okay, all right. Steve, back to you.
Again, I just, going back to page 9, the question about the airport and adding it to the UGB, is that considered, I mean, where does that fit in here? Is that considered part of finishing what we started, or is
I
that?
believe that's part of the UGB
It's just not listed
analysis.
specifically, but that's exactly where it goes.
Okay.
I just didn't know if that was.
We should list that
Yeah,
specifically.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I had a, let me ask the simpler ones and then come back to the other one. I was curious, on page 13, refinement plan amendments. I mean, you listed all the amendments you might make. Now, obviously, some of these, we haven't even really had a budget for refinement plans. I'm just, how are we going to be handling these amendments? These are going to be very intensive. You've got to go out and meet with them. I'm just curious, or maybe this is one of the follow-on phases or something. You mentioned that. The other ones, obviously, we know how we handle those, but we've never really, I haven't seen that process.
So these particular refinement plans refer to the couple of residential areas that we're going to be redesignating from multifamily to single family. So we have to change the diagram in the refinement plan as well as the land use diagram. So that's what these particular amendments for. I can let Terry speak more about, I mean, I don't know if you guys, what you've decided for public process at this point, but I mean, as we've mentioned, each of these main items will have their own, process and milestones. Do you have more to add to that, Terry?
Well, we try to capture that under area planning, really. So we'll develop a process for River Road Santa Clara, a different one for University Area Plan, Neighborhood Plan, or whatever name it has in the end.
Oh, I meant the redesignations, because that's what this refers to.
Yeah, we haven't figured that out yet.
Okay, but you will have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Refinement plan is not a easy slam dunk thing. Even if it's just a diagram amendment, there's a public process.
But I guess the point there is that this is very specific to what's needed for the UGB adoption package. It's not kind of opening up the whole plan.
Right.
Okay. No, I just wondered, for example, the university area plan, you have, just kind of gets involved because you've got two neighborhoods that have refinement plans and then you have one that doesn't. So.
Right, and this only refers to the adoption package, so what we're required, the work program that we're required to do to adopt our urban growth boundary, which university area planning, it doesn't fall under that particular package.
Right.
And then, if you go back a page on 12, under incentives, I'm going back again to the city manager's recommendations, or whatever you want to call it. So the last bullet item says develop enabling orders for the council. And that really is, the city manager asked you to develop a list of incentives. He didn't really say, I think some of these you should probably have to wait to let the city manager and the city council decide before you spend much time on. I mean, you shouldn't really spend. I would suggest you don't spend any. You could do some research about how other agencies have done it, but I think the focus should be really on finding incentives and listing them and helping, ranking them or whatever, and not so much on the enabling orders until you've received the orders to go ahead.
That's a good comment, and that is the intent.
Yeah. And then I have one other question here, about the parcel-specific plan diagram. I'm not that familiar with this project, and obviously some of the other commissioners are. I'm just concerned that now obviously this makes sense for the urban growth areas where we're expanding, but if you're applying this citywide, it's sort of like we're taking the status quo and now we're making that the zone, we're making that the de facto plan when it may not really be what we want to do in some cases, particularly if it's at a parcel-specific level. In other words, even though there might be a parcel that historically was this, over time, we may not want it to be that, and we want it to do something else. So I'm a little concerned that you take this approach and you might end up with something that's really more like you spot zone the whole city and make it difficult to make changes in the future that you might want to do. You follow what I'm, because this is a land use diagram you're going to adopt. It's going to be there for 20 years. So
I just to clarify, I think the intent is, as part of the adoption package, to move forward with something that's more specific than the current diagram, but not to amend it in any way that would change a current plan designation. So in some respects, it's I think, maybe accurate to describe it as status quo, but what it does do is provide more clarity for applicants as to a particular designation and the appropriate zoning for it. So, and in the case of UGB expansion areas, it will be parcel specific, much like any other individual property plan amendment. So it's not so much a policy issue as it is really reflecting and providing more clarity for applicants or future processes for plan amendment. So.
Again, I had no problem with it applied to the expansion areas. I just was concerned about that we're sort of codifying the status quo, and there's some cases where, I mean, we're already dealing with this in some cases where we're trying to, part of the expansion is uncodifying the status quo, right? Because we're trying to take some multifamily and make it single family and some cases.
We've got about 4 minutes, and we've got a number of folks in the queue.
I'll stop.
John Belcher wanted to respond to something there, though.
Well, but there is a status quo, and all this does is clarify it.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Bill?
I had a couple of questions. One on page 6 of the AIS, land for commercial jobs 2B under next steps. Is that where we'll be able to look at maybe that overlap of commercial and industrial zoning where things have changed over the years?
Exactly.
Okay, that was an easy one. And then on page 12 of the AIS, remind me what a TIF district is.
What a what?
TIF.
Under incentives.
Okay. And then the design assistance and development partnerships, will that give us some ability then to have flexibility in what we do, but still maintain the clear and objective standards that we have to meet? Is that kind of the goal there, to give us a little bit of out-of-the-box thinking, perhaps?
Oh, are we under incentives?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's in the parentheses.
Page 12 of the AIS, incentives, the second bullet point. Sorry about that. But like with the design assistance and some of those things, it seems like it's looking for an opportunity to be able to do some things out of the box,
Yes.
but yet still maintain the clear and objective standards that we have to do
Yes.
to make the statement.
I mean, I think of it more as facilitative, that we're trying to work a little bit more at the earlier stages with developers, applicants, and trying to find solutions that meet the code, but also, we're
It
trying
can
to
be win-win situations for everybody.
Exactly.
Okay.
There could be several different ways that happens, too, and we'll be exploring quite a few different options there, I think.
Jeff?
Yeah, I have one other request for clarification, and it's on page 12 under UGB expansion analysis. First bullet, conduct analysis and develop findings for residential and industrial and parks. third sub-bullet, evaluation of soil capacity for resource lands. I'm not sure I understand what that means.
So, for instance, for industrial, we're looking at, the recommendation is to expand in Clear Lake area, which is resource land, it's farmland or agricultural. In order to justify that, we actually have to look at all lands with similar soil classification. So if we're proposing to expand the urban growth boundary into resource lands, which are farm or forest, we have to show that we've looked at other lands of either have, I guess, not as good soils, not as good soils of productivity.
So this is farming capacity we're talking about?
Yeah, farming or forestry, just depending on where we...
Soil capacity means something else.
Okay, got it. No, okay. Woof, okay, right.
Thank you for the
yes.
clarification, Alyssa. I'm good, thank you.
Now, we're starting to borrow against the next agenda item, so let me go with 3 quick comments and then back to Steve. On page 12 of the AIS, the UGB expansion analysis, first off, the next to last bullet point, it talks about developing the phasing plan through annexation and CIP. Thanks for including the CIP here, and I would hope that the Planning Commission gets to get re-involved in that review process as we go through all this. Back up to the first bullet, the second sub-bullet under that UGB expansion analysis. Alyssa, this goes to, I think, a follow-on of Jeff's comments. It talks about cost estimates for public facilities. I know that there are criteria and there are priority criteria that we have to go through. With the council's addition of looking at Russell Creek, and then with the request from, I think, the Gagnes to add their land for analysis, while I appreciate the concern to conserve farmland and forest land and natural resource land, I would also ask that we be a little bit cautious about the cost that goes into improvements in other lands to the point that we would avoid designating lands that don't impact farm and forest and resource lands, but cost so much to extend the infrastructure to that the practicality of development is not there. So I see a lot of nods. I'm hoping we keep that.
Right. I mean, we don't want to bankrupt the city because we're trying to, stick with going into an exception area.
The city, or just say, no, we can't do it, and we're stymied, and actually aren't developing anything.
I mean, it needs to be a reasonable area.
Do the state rules allow for that as a criteria?
There are a couple places where we get to evaluate, the costs and the efficiency of providing service to areas. So it is absolutely something we get to look at. Maybe not to the degree that we'd all want to or logically want to apply it, but.
Okay. And then just final comment from me on page 14 of the AIS, taking the vision to the next level. This came up in our letter that we sent to the City Council. We talk about the South Willamette Concept Plan versus the University Area Plan and the River Road Santa Clara Area Plan. And is there really a distinction? If there is, let's make sure we clarify and understand what each of those types of plans actually means for people.
I tend to agree with you. I think maybe up until this point, the term area planning has served us well because we maybe have needed a little bit of latitude and understanding how that applies. But it seems to me moving forward, providing more clarity about kind of the differences between those planning efforts and putting some terminology to them may be beneficial.
Okay.
And it sounds like you agree.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In concept.
Fair enough.
Okay. Circle around, we've got Steve and then John, and if we could kind of keep our eye on the clock and zip this along, we'd appreciate it. Okay.
I'm only going to mention one other thing. And then going back to what Commissioner said about the soil capacity, I hope that we could also consider, I know we talked about it early on when we were talking about UGB, maybe there's, if there's a way that some of that prime agricultural land might end up with swaps being parks and used for community gardens, that wouldn't be a loss of, in other words, there wouldn't necessarily be a loss of farmland, and that could be considered in the analysis. It just seems, a great opportunity. Stuff.
John?
Process questions. If I remember correctly, in the past, the Planning Commission has recommended adoption of the work plan. So I'm wondering if that's going to happen. And the second part of that is, it also entailed taking the plan to the City Council, the joint session, Planning Commission and Council. Is that going to happen?
This year, that's not going to happen, and basically because the council already gave us direction for really 90% of what we'll be working on here. So that that technical attachment that talks about the next steps is what council approved when they approved the Envision Eugene proposal. And so it would be redundant to go back to them.
And so would our recommendation to approve.
And yes, and exactly. And so we're here to kind of share it and develop clarity about it.
That's fine. Just wanted to make sure we knew.
Yes, thanks for the question.
What's going on.
Any final questions, comments from the Planning Commission on this agenda? Bill, Gabe, Terry, Steve, Alyssa, good to see you guys.
Stay there.
Okay, so moving on to item 4, the new comprehensive plan structure. Robin?
I'll stall for him while he walks around the table. This item is really, as it is mentioned in the work plan, that we have to develop a new Eugene specific plan. And so we are at the very early stages of understanding what the framework of that plan might look like, but it's an important topic, so we thought we would bring it to you at this very early stage to kind of get your feedback and input. But we don't have all the answers right now, I can tell you that right now. But one of the things that we are trying to do, and I know Robin will go into this further, is how do we bring kind of all of the good process and work that came out of Envision Eugene and instill that in a new kind of regulatory plan or a new comprehensive plan. So how do we continue to find balance and inclusiveness, kind of it is what we've done with Envision Eugene, and put that into a plan. Wow.
That's a relic by now.
That is a relic, but I wonder how...
It's right on cue.
Is it?
You put arrowheads on everything, so it goes on forever.
So no
It's a
matter what
good
happens,
strategy.
it's still
Long-range
accurate.
planning.
I like that.
All right, so I'll let Robin take over.
Thanks, Carolyn. That's
Lights up.
yeah, a little bit. Thanks, Terry. So, yeah, as Carolyn mentioned here, we're doing a little why and what possibly for the Eugene Comp Plan, and a little bit about the how, although that's still being figured out. But in a nutshell, starting off here, we're talking about a new local plan. So as you all know, currently the guiding document is our beloved Metro Plan. And this is the guides our long-range planning for the entire region, including Eugene. And with the passage of House Bill 3337, of course, there are some changes mandated. The biggest one, of course, is the urban growth boundary, and that both Eugene and Springfield have to have their own UGB now. And because the UGB currently lives in the Metro Plan as a combined UGB, we have to pluck that out. So what's going to happen here is there will be some Eugene-specific items, for example, the urban growth boundary, land use policies and diagram, that are going to migrate over into a new plan. Now, I have an image here of our Envision Eugene recommendation. Of course, this is sort of the nascent comp plan for Eugene. This is the beginnings of it. It's not going to look exactly like this, but conceptually, because this is a very visual, very accessible document that's easy for folks to read if you're a commissioner, if you're a neighbor, if you're a developer, something like that, we want to carry forward that same concept into our comprehensive plan. So it's not only going to contain the UGB and policies and that sort of thing, it's going to contain more than that. It's going to do more for our community than that. So having said that, there will also be some things that will remain in the Metro Plan. Of course, anything that has to do with intergovernmental coordination. There's a lot of great stuff in here, and we still really believe in the importance of regional planning, so that's not going to go away. And exactly how those changes are going to take place, we just haven't figured out yet. So the main point here is that some will stay, some will go. And it's a big opportunity. And we have done some thinking already. In fact, I think it was almost a year ago that we shared a brief concept like this with DLCD during a previous presentation. And it's essentially a 4-part document is what we're envisioning for the new comprehensive plan. We're just seeing the Eugene plan here. We don't know what the title is going to be either. So there's 4 parts, kind of a snapshot of existing conditions, regulatory plan, and then a community vision piece and an implementation plan. And the last 2 pieces, we'll go through and talk about each of these in just a little bit more detail. Just to point out, though, that those last 2 pieces are not typically in a lot of comprehensive plans. So starting out with a snapshot, this is really about the existing conditions. Where are we today? So if we look at ECLA or a set of baseline data and information about our community today, helps us give us a springboard to think about where we're going. And that in key trends, of course, where we're headed, all that's going to be captured there in that snapshot piece. The regulatory plan, this is really the meat and potatoes here. This is what most people would typically think of as a comprehensive plan in most communities. It contains, in this case, a translation of our pillars into policies for the community. It will contain the urban growth boundary, the land use diagram, all those things I mentioned earlier that will migrate out of the Metro Plan will be contained in that regulatory piece. And we're also planning on being really clear about which elements are going to be used, for example, for land use processes. For if you're doing a land use application of some kind, where in the comp plan do you look, do you reference? And this will probably be the place that provides the most guidance. So the third piece, and Commissioner Laddick, this is getting back to the question that you asked earlier today about the community design guide. So again, we've talked a lot about vision in this community, and vision means that you actually see something. You see a condition or some ideas about the community that help give you direction for actual on-the-ground projects. And I'll show you a precedent here in just a few minutes, but the community design guide piece is actually a non-regulatory piece that is a placeholder for the community's aspirations about how we want the community to look in the future, and to give us some specific guidance around that in the form of some design principles, as well as talking about what it means to build or create something in Eugene, what the context is all about. So I'll fill in some more blanks on that here in just a minute too. Finally, the fourth piece, and this is an incredibly important piece, is an implementation plan. For those who've read the Metro Plan, there are actually some implementation recommendations in here. They're kind of scattered throughout, and there aren't a whole lot of them. So what we're talking about here is basically just saying what we're going to do really clearly as a component of the comprehensive plan. And this is something that will guide our work, we imagine, for a long time, probably the duration of the plan. So any post-adoption actions, of course, as we've talked about in the work plan discussion earlier, some things are going to have to be adopted before the comp plan gets adopted as part of it. And then there's going to be a whole bunch of things that we're going to have to do later, we're going to want to do later on. And so we'll outline those and also talk about projects and programs and relative priorities, so marching orders basically moving forward. So some of the key goals is we want this plan to be strong, so complete and legal and defensible, of course, friendly, and this is really important because a lot of planning documents just aren't, and we want ours to be that way. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. You know what? I skipped over this because my little mouse wheel just zoomed over it. But this, and I'm going to come back to that. We want it to be friendly, easy to follow, visual, and finally, we want it to be reliable. So again, a guidance for action, consistent, really relevant to what we're doing. So think of a Labrador Retriever, right? That's how we want to see our plan, right?
Or a
want to
pug.
really love it.
What, a pug?
A pug.
Oh, okay.
So I'm backing up one slide here. Again, we talked about those 4 components. There's also some really important technical pieces that need to be part of a comp plan. What we're saying is those are going to be in the comp plan, but they're not going to be front and center. They'll be in appendices, for example, economic opportunities analysis, housing needs analysis, a glossary of terms, and any other technical, I guess the findings is a separate thing, but anything that's technical and not really relevant to the vision is going to go in here. So there's our key goals. So here's a precedent in thinking about the way that we might potentially structure our comp plan. We looked at a community who has won numerous awards, and this happens to be Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I'm going to pass around, maybe in 2 different directions, some components of this. Essentially, and there was a link to this. Did anybody have a chance to take a peek at that link to Cheyenne? I don't know how many awards they won for this, but quite a few. Anyway, the component of the Cheyenne plan that is most relevant and interesting for us is this, what they call the community plan. There's 4 pieces to it. And you might recognize the 4 pieces because it's really similar to what we're proposing here. There's a snapshot. They're calling it a structure plan, a shape plan, and a build plan. But essentially, the content of these plans are really visual. So when we look at, or when they write policies, they're actually including visuals, they're including diagrams, and showing people what they mean. They also go into quite a bit of detail describing the character of their community, the underpinnings. In this case, they're looking at their regional architectural identity. And this gets back to the community design guide that we were talking about earlier. What is Eugene's identity, and how do we want to continue with that moving forward? They have a large plan, sort of a structure plan for the community and how that's going to look. We have already done that to some extent with the plan that's contained in our recommendations. So we're already moving in this direction. They also, again, here's some more diagrams when they talk about, for example, neighborhood business centers, or what do they mean by neighborhood vehicular corridors. They actually line it out and provide some concepts and guidance for how the community will look in the future. So briefly on next steps, essentially, the development of the comp plan is really tied to finishing what we started work items. So as these work items are complete and they come together, we're going to start trying to plug them in to creating this plan as we go. So it's not something that we're just going to write all at once. It'll be developed piece by piece. And the organization and the layout right now, of course, is just an outline. And as things come together, it may influence how the plan is organized and structured. So we're, certainly open to that and to some modifications. And there will be plenty of iterations of community review along with the rest of the work that we do moving forward on this. So, any thoughts or questions on the intent behind that?
We'd like to begin the discussion. Can we get that? Bill?
I think it's really good and important to have the visual aspect mixed in with that. And I know that's something I've mentioned before, but just to be able to have a visual picture of, as the example I use is, what does 10 dwelling units per acre look like? And to be able to have that visual, I think, is real important, because I think that helps people really understand what that means. So I think that's a good aspect of that organization.
John?
Community involvement. It's challenging enough to get someone to respond to a plan, a proposal. This is a bit more nebulous and amorphous. So have you thought about how you're going to engage the public and getting feedback on a totally different way of looking at where we're going in the future?
Well, I think as far as the content goes, we have a tremendous amount of feedback already, and with all the work items that we've listed here, a lot of those will actually have community outreach components, really robust community outreach components to them. And so it's a really good question. Given that there's going to be outreach for all the pieces, what kind of outreach do we do for the whole thing? And I think that that's going to have to play out. Certainly, we're really committed to exemplary community outreach. So
I just think it's going to be a different mind process for someone to talk about what do you want a transit corridor to look like in the future as opposed to what do you want the zoning of this piece of property to look like.
yeah, that's a good point. So speaking of, for example, the community design guide, that aspirational piece will be very interesting.
Okay. I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah.
I'm just flagging it as a possible
Yeah.
new way of doing business.
Robin, I'm trying to get my mind around how we devolve the Metro Plan. And it's been around a long time. Some of the policies are probably obsolete. But is it, I read in here about integrating the Metro Plan into the new Eugene Plan. Is it your anticipation that Eugene-specific policies and implementation measures will be plucked from that, reviewed for relevance, and then perhaps incorporated or put into the Eugene-only plan?
We've actually just this morning come from a meeting with our partners at Springfield and Lane County talking about this subject.
Okay.
And I think we're all really in agreement that the Metro Plan needs to be revisited because there are some obsolete items currently, and as Springfield and Eugene develop their own local plans, other items in the Metro Plan will become obsolete. And so our kind of order of operation here is that, in the next 5 or 6 months or so, the different jurisdictions will get together and kind of try to outline the contents not only of their local plan, but of what the Metro Plan will be. And then the two jurisdictions, Eugene and Springfield, will continue on and develop their local plan first, and then once that's complete, then we'll look at the Metro Plan and figure out kind of what the structure is, what's left that needs to be addressed in the Metro Plan.
That's interesting, Carolyn, because the flip side of the Eugene-only plan and the Springfield-only plan is this intergovernmental part, the regional part. And, I think back on the sessions that we had with Springfield about their urban growth boundary and separation, and that whole discussion about intergovernmental agreements and formalizing those, if not in the plan, then how do you do what legal documentation is there elsewhere? Why would it not be possible while Eugene is doing its own thing and Springfield is doing its own thing to, at least as a start, pluck those intergovernmental policies out of the current Metro Plan, check them for relevance, and then build from there and build the interregional, the Metro Plan part of it concurrently? Is it just the staff?
I think we're saying the same thing. We will, as we are building our local plans, we'll certainly be looking at the Metro Plan and making sure that we've got everything covered that needs to be covered in our local plan. But there's going to be some kind of back and forth between the two. And so what we're talking about is working at that, working at the regional level with both Springfield and Lane County to kind of map out how that will go.
Because doesn't that house somehow mesh with this lane livability
It
consortium?
totally does. And so regional planning is not,
$3 million.
yes, regional planning is not going away by any means. We're redefining it, essentially. And how the Metro Plan fits into that is still, that's one piece of the pie. It's not the whole thing. Anything else to add to
No,
that?
I think that's great.
Okay.
John?
Yeah, I had along the same lines. Springfield is also doing a plan.
They are.
Are you going to be finishing around the same time? And the reason that I ask is I'm still confused. If in the Metro Plan you extract things, does that mean it no longer exists in the Metro Plan? And if you extracted something worded differently than, let's say, Springfield on a similar topic, how is that extracted? And then what is really the precedent setting and which overrules? Eugene Comprehensive Plan or the Metro Plan if it's not extracted?
Excellent questions, and our legal staff has been wrestling with those questions for a while. And can you
No,
summarize where they are with that?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, there's a lot of that kind of information that we're going to have to reconcile, and the timing is a little messy with Springfield. We're probably not going to be adopting either of our plans within a close proximity to each other. So we're going to have to figure out how we're both consistent with the Metro Plan, yet be in such a way that we can go our separate directions where needed. So we don't really have any answers to that right now, other than to say that we know we need to be looking at those, and we'll definitely have all that resolved to the extent we can.
And the second question, I'm not familiar with Cheyenne, but when I looked at those documents, it said it was prepared by the MPO, not necessarily the city, if they're a city of Cheyenne, unless Cheyenne is so big, it only has an MPO that covers Cheyenne and not multiple cities. But my question is does that change how you'll do this, or since you like this plan, it seems to come from a Metro MPO focus?
Well, we like the structure of the plan.
Okay, I like visual.
Yeah.
The less I read, the better.
And so it's less kind of about the kind of we're not looking so much to the jurisdictional relationships in that plan. It's more about just the structure, the components, what's in, what's out.
And just add to that, maybe inspiration for how to create a plan that's accessible and kind of breaks it down to things that are most relevant to people that are reading it.
Okay. Yeah. And finally, and I didn't know where to bring this up, but when you talked about the work program and you talking about the new plan structure, and I know we have a period once a year where we point to committees. I guess my question is, under this process of either, are there going to be any types of new committees formed, and will the Planning Commission be making appointments to those, or will they be outside that? I guess that's my...
I think that's a good question related to the entire work plan, really. When you look at the work plan, are there different breakout committees or focus groups for some of the individual projects? We don't have we're not using a kind of standardized one-size-fits-all thing. We're looking at each one of the work items and identifying, well, what are the needs? And so we don't have that today, but we will be kind of identifying areas where we do want, for instance, a Planning Commission representative or a wider community focus group and that type of
Sort of like
thing.
Envision Eugene did for certain areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just was wondering.
Yeah, that's still to come.
Okay.
John Belcher?
I seem to be hooked on process issues. Where is the Springfield Urban Growth Boundary Amendment process at the moment? Can you give us an update?
Are you talking about the coterminus? Actually, we talked about that this morning, too. Springfield, it sounds like Springfield's council will be taking it up in September, and our council will be taking it up in late September. The county gave a kind of a conditional approval, but wanted to work some things out with Springfield in the interim, and then they would make like a final action after our city council does. So ideally, it's wrapped up one way or the other in October.
And did they move the boundary to match the city boundary, the urban growth boundary to match the city boundary?
That is still the county's recommendation. Springfield hasn't come out to say what their recommendation is. Or what their, it's not a recommendation, I guess, what it would be what they're voting on.
Looks like Cheyenne is about 40 miles from Laramie, for what that's worth about NPOs.
Okay. Steve?
I wanted to follow up on Commissioner Reddick's suggestion, and maybe I missed a piece here, but it seems to me, given the nature of this pulling out and separating, it would be valuable, and I know you probably have been, or I assume you've been meeting with these other participants, but in terms of the quote Metro plan, not the Eugene plan, it would seem like it would be valuable to sort of come to some understanding with the other parties about parts you know that it will stay in, parts you're not sure of, and parts you know that'll come out, and sort of like setting up a framework to how to handle this. And that way, it might just, a lot, as Commissioner Athletic said, first of all, you can work on those, those ones in parallel, the ones that you know that are going to stay in, or maybe there don't need to be a lot of changes, I don't know. And then you know for sure you can work on the ones that are yours, and then you can try to deal with the ones in the middle that there seem to be some disagreement on. So, but it just seems like that would be a sort of a first step to try to get things into 3 categories and then move forward.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's almost exactly what we talked about doing this morning, is a little bit further down the road to get together and kind of develop that framework. And I think your 3 categories probably make sense, that's how things will fall out.
I had a question on policy development. When we've had plan amendments that we've reviewed, sometimes an applicant will review policies that are city actions only, those kinds of policies that they think maybe apply to them, but it's really something at the city level. The way this was written in terms of making sure things are in compliance with the Metro Plan policies. Might there be a way in the future to separate those from the ones that applicants have to address, so that they aren't guessing about the city relevant kind of topics?
Yeah, that sort of goes
You know
back
what
to
I'm talking
the, yeah. So if you come to the city and you have a land use application, what exactly do you need to be looking at?
What policies must be addressed if you're going to do an amendment?
Yeah, and part of the intent for this, just conceptually, is to make it really, really clear to whoever is reading this or using this which pieces you need to look at for
And
what.
that's just 30 years of hindsight. I mean, 30 years ago, we couldn't, I don't think, have predicted what we needed to address in that. So.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments? Shoot, we've got time. We could crank out a couple of chapters and then
Awesome. Great, go.
Yeah, I like your thinking.
We're ready.
John.
Well, I still would like to hear where City Council is as far as approving Envision Eugene, if you could let us know.
Yeah, I'm going to forget the dates. When were we back? May was our last.
June.
June 13th.
Oh,
it got
Carrie's
moved.
got it.
That's right.
No, we were at the end of May, and then we moved.
So our at our final work session with council on June 13th, they voted to approve the Envision Eugene proposal and the technical document, which is your attachment. Which attachment number is that? The attachment B in your packet. So that was kind of the formal direction to approve that and move the Envision Eugene into the formal adoption process. They, you will note that they did not identify a specific urban growth boundary. So that work is still happening because we're still doing our technical and legal analysis. But it does identify what our land need is, so how much we are planning for, and the types of land. And there were only a few adjustments that they made to the proposal. And if I can recall, they were, number one, to continue looking at the airport and make sure we have a recommendation as to whether that should come in or go out, to extend the number of expansion areas that we're looking at to include the Russell Creek Basin and the property that is directly west of Hynix.
Compatibility.
That's the Gagne property. And to look at some of the concerns we've heard about compatibility of industrial and housing being in close proximity in the Clear Lake area. And so kind of to explore those environmental justice concerns and make a recommendation going forward. I think those were the three areas that they asked us to do in addition to the what's included in the technical summary. And importantly, that technical summary is what we need to do to take our package to the state. But it's not the complete Envision Eugene vision. And so part of that, part of the language was also to move forward with adoption of our vision. So we feel like we have good direction from them and really kind of broad support from the community to move forward with that proposal.
John?
More of a comment than anything else. John Reese took the Envision Eugene process to the City Club for discussion a week ago, last Friday, I believe. And the first questioner was, I'm losing her name.
Mia Nelson.
Mia Nelson, excuse me, from 1,000 Friends. And her question basically was, she's seen numerous processes like this where at the last minute somebody shows up and says, take my property, you don't have the objection, so on and so forth. And she said that usually ends up in a 10-year process of litigation and fighting and eventually failing. So she's just made the point that she hopes that that isn't the path we go down. That's available online if you want to see it.
Yeah, it was a good question, and we are, part of her question was also, will you continue to work with the community through your analysis of expansion areas? And our answer is yes. And Mia in particular has a vast amount of knowledge of the Goal 14 rule and how it's applied and has played out in the courts. And so we have every intention of kind of yes, of heeding that comment and taking in her expertise and other folks as well. So we want it to be legal, and we want it to maintain the same transparency that we've had through this whole process. So we will do that.
Thank you. Final comments, questions? I certainly can't speak for Rick Duncan, but I remember when I first got on the Planning Commission, he had a great deal of, he said it over and over again about what exactly is this community's vision in terms of growth and development and policies. And if he was here, I would suspect, Robin, that he'd be real keen on trying to amplify that vision thing and making sure people are all on the same track about what the future ought to look like. So thanks. Don't stay away too long. Keep us plugged in if you would.
Will do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks. John?
And again, I would expand to say I think this process has been the best one we've ever done to try to get some clarity on where we want our community to go. I mean, all the issues are not 100% in agreement by everyone, and they never will be in this community or probably any other. But I think we have a much better feel for where we are and where we're headed than we've ever been. Work, folks.
Okay, last agenda item, Carolyn, items from staff.
I feel like I kind of updated you on where we are with the division at the beginning of the meeting. The only other thing I would add is, and I think this was emailed to you, but at OPI this year, they are doing specifically a planning commission training on September 15th, and so I will pass these around for you so that you can take advantage of that if you'd like to. I think it's a good opportunity.
Oh, I thought you meant they wanted us to be trainers.
I'm sure you could. Yep.
Anything else?
Anything else? Terry has something.
I have something for Robin to tell you about. Would you tell them about the display that's going to be at the celebration?
Yes. That's actually a great segue. Thank you, Terry, for the reminder. So the American Institute of Architects is doing, of course, as they always do, the People's Choice Awards at the Eugene Celebration. And in the past, it's been, and these are kind of their words, more kind of a beauty pageant for fantastic design projects. And they want it to be more than that. And they've been working specifically with a group of folks, the ABC, the architects for, I forget what it stands for. Help me out. Beautiful Community or something like that. Essentially, it's a group of architects and their former chairs of AIA here locally that have banded together to really elevate design in the community as how important it is. We all know design is important. And so they've asked us to participate in the People's Choice Awards through the work that has been done with Envision Eugene, and also a set of 10 principles that they've come up with for design excellence in the community. So when you go check out, which I hope you all do, the People's Choice Awards, there will be beautiful projects that you can vote on, and there will be a big piece that puts a banner up about Envision Eugene and says, hey, this is our community. Each one of these projects contributes to our community in some way. And it just asks the question, how, it's beautiful, do you like it? And how does it support the overall goals for our community as a whole? So that's a new and exciting piece, and we're really thrilled to be working in partnership with local architects and designers. So
The date?
when is the date of the Eugene celebration?
24th to 26th.
August 24th through 26th?
But I think the display will be up longer than that.
And where is the
In the
display?
lobby of
Yeah.
the Broadway Commerce Center.
Yeah, as you go in, there happen to be 7 pillars in the lobby of the Commerce Center.
No.
There are.
Oh, my God.
I know. It's just so.
Thanks, Robin.
Yeah.
Anything else, Carolyn, from staff?
Nope.
Members of the commission? I've got a couple of things. Carolyn, I mentioned a couple of different times about committee work. Can you and I get together and put together a list of committees as they stand?
Yes.
And we'll shoot that out to the commission members. I'd like to do that this month. But what I think we'll do, folks, is Carolyn and I will get our heads together about existing committees, and Steve and others have mentioned maybe some potential other committees. Prepare that list, shoot it out, see what kind of interest there is, and then get it back together and go from there.
It's a great idea.
Okay.
Yep.
And when is our next meeting, and where might it be?
Will not be here.
I don't believe we have a meeting scheduled at this time. However, I can tell you when we do, it won't be in this room.
Well, they're very reassuring. We don't know when or where, but
Well,
we know what we don't know.
So you know that we are transitioning out of this facility, and so this will be probably our last meeting in this room. We have worked to secure the equipment from this room that allows us to televise and whatever the word is, webcast, thank you, our meetings, and we'll be relocating that into the sloat room, which is where this group formerly met. And so once that transition happens, I believe we'll be meeting in the sloat room again. There may be some in-between time there, and my guess is we'll be meeting in the Bascom-Tykeson room in the library, which we've done from time to time when this room wasn't available. So we will be meeting in different locations. I think it'll be great to get that equipment in the sloat room, though, and have that available.
This equipment, too?
It already has it there.
Oh, it already has it?
Yeah. I think it's a better projector, too.
But we don't know when.
We do not have a next meeting scheduled. Or is there? Nope. So you and I will be in touch about that.
John?
Just want to reiterate our thanks to Jeff for his serving us for the past year plus. Thank you very much.
Anything else? And this meeting's adjourned.